I'm in my 6th season photographing Formula One, and over that time I've learnt quite a bit. Working so closely with teams and people involved in the sport, you tend to notice a lot. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 20 observations that you may not have ever noticed. Let's get straight into it, shall we, with things you didn't know about Formula One. See this little camera that's positioned above each car in each garage? The teams need to lock those cars up at night because the crews aren't allowed to work on them until a certain point each day. There's a curfew, and while that curfew's in place, FIA crew have access to that camera and can see what's going on in the garages. When the curfew's finished though, the cameras are cut off. Why aren't the pit boxes parallel? As you can see here, they're all on a slight angle. Well, Monaco is partly to blame. Because that pit lane is so tight, the cars come in at an angle and stop, and then turn quickly on the way out. And that tradition has been in place ever since. Next up, number 3. Actually, before I do number 3, if you're heading overseas anytime soon, you'll probably need a VPN, and my VPN of choice is Surfshark. Surfshark is an app and a browser extension that allows me to position my device anywhere in the world. So if I want to access Facebook or Instagram in countries that won't allow it, by logging on via a country that does using Surfshark, you get around that. And if you use Netflix or another streaming platform, you can actually get different content by logging on with Surfshark in another country. And to get an exclusive Surfshark deal, click on the link in the description below, enter the promo code Kim, and you'll get 3 months absolutely free. Thank you, Surfshark. What are these signs on pit wall all about? Well, I originally thought they denoted what was opposite, which team's garage was opposite. But as you can see, they're not opposite. They're some meters down the track. To be exact, they're 17 metres to 44 metres down the track. They indicate the start and finish of a 27 metre long section of pit lane. There's one mark of 44 metres from a team's pit box and another 17 metres. Each team has a crew member who's responsible for releasing the car, and if there's another car travelling down pit lane that's in that 27 metre long box, they won't release their car. That's an FIA rule, and it's the same for all teams. You probably know that all of the teams do pit stop practice every race weekend, out in pit lane. But did you realise that those cars never have fuel in them? And another thing regarding fuel, they're always fueled at 10 degrees lower than ambient temperature because it allows them to get more fuel in the car because it's less dense. One of F1's major sponsors is DHL, and that company's responsible for getting all of the team's equipment from race to race. And typically they'll use 7 aircraft per race to move all of that equipment. It's worth noting too that some of it goes via sea freight, and they tend to leapfrog race by race. And what does it cost them per kilo, roughly? Around $280. And there's tens of thousands of kilos for each team each year. When cars are transported from race to race, all of the engines and gearboxes are removed and tagged by the FIA. What is this? Well, this is the drink pouch that the drivers typically drink from during an on-track session. And where's it positioned in the car? Well, most of them right behind the driver's seat. And who provides that drink to the engineers? Well, that's a driver's trainer. And the weight of it will be determined by the team.
You will not have the drink.
Does a driver have his own pit crew, some of you have asked? No, a driver will share a pit crew with his teammate. That's down to numbers. You need around 20 people for a pit stop, and given that there's only one pit box, only one car can be attended to at the same time, although they can stack cars. German driver Nico Hülkenberg has an umlaut above his U. Well, he used to in his name, but this year he's dropped it to make him more international. Whose face does F1 use on the mocked-up passes that are displayed around the track for marshals to look at? David Hasselhoff, as you can see here. Why David? I can't tell you, but he is the choice for F1 for those passes. For those of you who've seen my Why Do Drivers Live in Monaco video, you'll know that primarily it's for the tax advantages. But did you realise that the 2 French drivers, in fact any French driver, gets no tax break by living in Monaco? That's because Monaco is effectively allowed to operate by the French government. And what the French don't want is their citizens moving to Monaco to get out of paying tax. But they're more than happy for citizens of every other country to do just that. Do F1 cars have a fire extinguisher? Yes. It's built in and has 1.5 kilos of fire extinguishant. And who deploys that? Well, it can be either a driver or a marshal. and it normally buys them around 30 seconds of extra time in the event of a fire. How does catering work for teams at the track? Good question. Well, I can answer it for you. Every team has their own caterer. Someone from those catering companies will head out to the markets each day to pick up fresh produce for the teams. For the European races, the motorhomes travel from track to track, and those are all set up with lovely kitchens, whereas when they do the flyaway races, sometimes the facilities are not quite so elaborate. If you've been to a track and watched a race live and viewed it on the television screens at the race, you'll know that there's a delay, and it's around 5 seconds from something happening to when you see it on the screen. Why is that? It's a bit like a radio delay system where if something nasty happens on track, the director can quickly cut away from it. F1 drivers are pretty darn competitive, and in instances out on track, it's not uncommon for drivers to do some, well, cheeky things like perhaps tear off their visor on their helmet and discard it in the hope that it ends up in one of the car's intakes behind them, resulting in overheating and perhaps a pit stop to clear the intakes. Cheeky, but hard to prove. 8 of the F1 teams have watch sponsors, and you've probably noticed that it's not only the drivers wearing the sponsors' watches. Who gets a watch though in the garage? Well, it depends on how close you are to the front of the garage. The more you're in the public's eye and on TV, the greater chance you have of being given a watch. Is it for good? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on the company. Now, I caught Carlos Sainz wearing this belt one day. Do you recognise it, the logo? This is from the Augusta National Golf Club, the home of the US Masters, and Carlos has played that course in the past. Do you know what this person is doing? Well, I do, because I asked the question and I didn't know prior to asking. Every day, and sometimes multiple times during the day, pit lane is swept with this magnetic roller to pick up metal objects which could become a danger. F1 teams often do photoshoots at the track for their own promotion or perhaps for sponsors. But did you realise that for some shoots they're required to cover up certain logos? Why? Well, it may contradict tobacco advertising rules, alcohol advertising rules, gambling, etc. And so rather than getting a whole new race suit done up or a car re-logoed, sometimes there'll just be some clever positioning of things to make sure that those logos don't appear in those shots. How often are cars painted? It was a question that I received recently. Well, I can tell you that most of the cars aren't painted. Most of them are vinyl wrapped. Of course, in the old days, paint was used. In fact, going back a few years ago, I was tipped off that at a spray painter's workshop in Austin, Texas, there were 2 Williams cars and 2 Haas cars being spray painted there. Well, the chassis were anyway. But today, vinyl is used because it's quicker, cheaper and lightweight. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two from this video. Before I go, I'll say that you can get onto prostarpics.com for most of my digital images from F1. You'll find all of my F1 photo books, wall art, signed prints by drivers and team principals, and merchandise at kimillman.com. And for my best images live from the track and during the week, I'll implore you to go to Instagram and search at Kim Illman. Oh, and I'm also on Facebook and Threads. Thanks for watching and stay passionate. They both share the same... No. Hell.